Oh my God, who the hell cares?
Are you feeling the aesthetic? Huh? Just like this Game Boy's batteries are dead, so too is the appeal of the past. Here's the situation. Little did you know, the target demographic for this is you and me, after all. It actually is an appeal to what we consider nostalgia. As I pointed out in the intro there with that all aesthetic and no soul thing that I did there with the AI. Kind of a compounding effect of false nostalgia. I meant to evoke the feeling of Daft Punk from the early 2000s, as these people are attempting to evoke the intersection between millennials and Gen X. Now, you might be wondering what I'm talking about and why I'm wearing a leather jacket today. Well, it's because I don't really know where this came from. I assume I own it because I'm the only person that lives in this house, so who knows? But who knows? Somebody could have left it here. It's mine now, and it fits the jive of what's going on, because just as foolish as I look, so too does the Intergalactic, the Heretic Profit game. Now, I forgot the name of it because it's like a completely forgettable name. It draws reference from a story called Cowboy Bebop, and I'm sure if you're a subscriber to this channel, you're either familiar with that or you've heard it thrown around quite a bit. It's an anime from the early 90s, I believe, mid-90s, late 90s, I think it was, 1997, I think. It was late 90s, and so it featured some people in space that were bounty hunters, and that was referred to as a cowboy as sort of a code lingo because these people operated outside the law. Granted, the law put these bounties out, but the police of that like space of the outer space area between Earth and Mars, presumably this is where most of the space stuff happens in Cowboy Bebop. The situation is that they're referred to as cowboys there, and so they're outside the law and that sort of thing. This makes no effort to try and do that, by the way, as you saw in the trailer. If you've seen it, we're not going to go through it in this video because I don't need to take any more risks with copyright strikes here, okay? That intro I made there was like right against the line, right against the line. So we'll move on, though, to what's something I don't think a lot of people are noticing here, and the reason why they put out games like this and why they try to appeal so hard to that intersection between millennial and Gen X is because of this phenomenon right here. And so this is from Hosun, and what you need to do is you need to go over to X and follow this person because they're dead on with their analysis of what's happening, not just with the brand visuals, but with how the brands behave. You ever notice how Burger Kings just kind of look like cafes now that you'd see plunked down in like some horrible industrial park? You ever notice how, like, the McDonald's are kind of going the way of gray bricks as well? And most of the fast food places sort of conform to a general shape and size. They don't have any unique features. Sort of like your Pizza Huts used to have those hut roofs, right? Those are gone. The unique interior architecture design also gone with Burger King and its weird permanent wait in line. You remember that? They had those permanent posts with the wait in line barriers in them. So even if you were the only person, you had to run through a maze of permanently constructed, what would be like a rope line in case they had too many people. It's a wild, wild thing, but they got rid of that. They got rid of all that. Now, of course, I appreciate getting rid of like the maze to fast food line. I don't need it anymore, but anyway, I appreciate that that's gone, but look at what he points out here. This is what Hosun points out. And so we'll take a closer look so you guys can see. Now you see the Revolt logo changed. Facebook got more simplistic. Now they've moved completely to Meta, so don't worry about that one. Google became more simplistic. Microsoft definitely did. Airbnb still hasn't finished changing. Spotify has changed. Pinterest has simplified. eBay has simplified. Uh, Rimowa has also simplified. Bertulli has simplified. Saint Laurent has. I'm a country mouse. I don't know these brands. Okay, I'm just doing my best. And again, you see right here these very, very simple, very, very simplistic style logos. Well, there's a purpose for that, and we'll skip past this video here. It's very helpful, but I don't want to, again, skate copyright. So your brain processes images, okay? And this is the difference, is that for audio and taste and other sensories, it's a little slower for the brain to receive these things. It's not very slow, mind you, where like you have like a slow reaction time of getting hit in the face with a water balloon and then going, ooh, I got hit in the face after the water's running down your face. It's not that. It's as soon as you can see like a candle at the other end of a football field. That's how sophisticated the human eye is. At like 100 yards in like dusk kind of light, you can make out a flickering candle at the edge of a football field. That's how sophisticated your eye is. That's just a small example of what your eyes are capable of. And so right here, this graph sort of points out what's going on here. And so the brain is visually wired. And that's what this game is taking exploitation of, okay? That's what this game is really trying to push itself into visually and story-wise, okay? Because we got a plot leak here that came out from 4chan. Apparently some developer that was along the way of this game, this Intergalactic, the Heretic Profit game, such a remembering name, right? I'm good at remembering that so well. I already don't speak English, right? So anyway, we'll go back to this right here, and I just want to attract your attention to this very simple fact right down at the bottom. The human brain processes images 60,000 times faster than text, okay? So as you're speaking, right, your brain starts making images up, right? Ideally, as you're reading, you see these images forming in your head, and it helps your brain better understand what's happening. A lot of kids didn't know what Hermione and Ron looked like until the movies came out because they weren't depicted on the covers of the books. All right. And they weren't depicted in color if they were drawn inside of any of the iterations of the Harry Potter books. And that's just a small example of what I'm talking about. Same thing with the Lord of the Rings. Nobody really knew what Frodo and Samwise and Gandalf looked like. They had kind of a rough idea. And so they depicted their best idea. And then, of course, the Jackson movies came along and depicted it for real life. And so this is what I'm talking about. They're exploiting what's familiar to us, okay? To shortcut trying to explain anything about the game, they are trying to show you, like, this has anime stuff in it. This takes inspiration from Cowboy Bebop. This takes inspiration from Akira. This takes inspiration from this other video game. It's one of those things. It's why the stupid ship that she's in has a Porsche on it, has a Porsche symbol on the back of it, right? You remember that from the intro. It had a Porsche symbol on the backside of it. So you have to ask yourself, is Porsche making space Winnebagos? Because this woman lives inside of this thing and lives comfortably. It's narrowly compared to a spaceship, if only for the sliding doors and the dead lighting overhead, that has there, this sort of fluorescent lighting I have here even. Maybe I'm on a spaceship right now. Who knows? Maybe I'm on a Porsche Winnebago out here, this space RV of, space bounty hunters, okay? That's pretty amazing, right? So you're probably wondering, if they have so much to convey, why are they taking so much time to kind of explain to us that this is a retro intersection between what millennials and Gen X recognize, right? It's again, intersection, okay? They like that word. So here we had it broke down for us what's happening in this story. And don't worry, I made the image bigger here so we can go through it. And so I'll zoom in a little bit more here because this is a little too small. And so here we go. I'm not blind, okay? I just want to make sure everybody can see it at home. And so it is a little cut off, so we'll have to move back and forth here as we read these things. But so this basically the way this person explains it is that the plot and gameplay details revealed below were sent to a handful of gaming journalists, most notable of whom include Jason Schreier, but they are debating whether or not to share it. The leaker is supposedly a disgruntled Naughty Dog staff member who hates the direction the company is going as Druckmann gets more and more powerful and influential. Part of the reason why Schreier is hesitant to give the okay to this game, or like the okay to talk about this stuff. Yeah, it's right, to talk about it. And so this friend is in an exclusive gaming journalist Discord, and this is the information that was leaked. So the player character, her name is Jordan. She was part of the Five Aces, and we don't need to go through this whole thing. It's a very simplistic plot. It's not really DEI heavy. It's just sort of painfully cliche, I guess you might say. It's I don't know. I mean, it feels very much like one of those filler anime that's the company just made in order to retain a copyright, you know? Like Zoid's Wild was very bland. This isn't in that vein, don't worry. Let me explain what happens in this story. So Jordan has an issue in that her former group, the Five Aces, have broken up, all right? To her recollection. Now, this guy that's gone out on his own, he's a derelict kind of criminal fella, and so he's got a bounty on him, all right? Now, in the process of like escaping from the law, he ends up in a Semperia, right? Now, they pronounce it Simperia, which is S-I-M-P, it's S-E-M-P, but like simplify, it's very stupid. And so the Simperians, right? The simps, the Simperians. All right, so let me just spoil this whole thing. What happens is that this guy lands, he discovers the Simperians were once humans who were part of a teleportation experiment, something in the process of like quantum entanglement being used to create gateways between Earth and distant worlds. And so they ended up on this world, and much like traveling through the void in 40K will cause you to like the warp, rather traveling through the warp to you'll get kind of like ucky and gross. That's kind of what happened to these guys, is it hyper accelerated their evolutionary cycle, and so they became sort of monstrous in form, and so they were banned basically from returning to Earth after that. And so they had like this that's what the opening prophetic line in the beginning of the story is they're talking about how it'll take many generations, but one day we will have revenge on Earth, is basically what that's meant to say. It's not anything earthbound, it's not an old mythos from the Earth, it's an entirely made up thing for this. And so what ends up happening is that you, the player, square off against this fella that you're next to in the center here, this Geraldo Rivera looking fella. And you square off with him. He has a big old tank because, as usual, giant tank bad, you know. But here's the kicker, all right? It's one of those choose your own adventure situations. After you kill this guy and you have your remorse because apparently you were ex-lovers, and they wait to tell you to the end about that because drama. Anyway, as if it wasn't predictable. But anyway, why would a woman go after a man if she didn't love him? Like, really? Come on. If he's not her father, brother, or lover, why the is she going after him? Come on. We're not stupid, okay? Anyway, back to the plot. So anyway, you defeat this guy, and his whole thing is like a humanitarian thing, in that he's trying to help these people get revenge on Earth. In the process of like building up efforts to get revenge on Earth, they build this AI army that creates all these horrible machines you have to fight along the way, and that's where the tank comes from that he has. And so, of course, the Simperians had built up all this weaponry, and they couldn't get to Earth because Earth locked them out, and, you know, space wizardry, who knows. And so this guy dies. You have the choice then to wipe out the Galactipole because, Interpol, get it? Galactipole. Interpol, get it? Get it, guys? Police that go all over the galaxy. Galactipole, get it? I hope that was annoying for you as it was for me when I first read it, because that's all I heard in my head was like some annoying, irreverent millennial character just repeating that. Do I get it? Do you get it, Mr. Krabs? Do you get it, Mr. Krabs? Do you get it, Mr. Krabs? Anyway, so in this situation, you can shoot down the Galactipole and free the Simperians to go screw with Earth and wreak ultimate havoc on them. And then, or you can blast down the Simperian weaponry and defeat their AI hub, because apparently AI only operates out of one transmitter. Seems very efficient. Anyway, so big brain stuff, big brain stuff. So anyway, you wipe out that, and then the Galactipole take care of the Simperians forever, and they're wiped out of existence. So that's neat. That's helpful. And so in either case, though, if you shoot down the Galactipole, or if you shoot down the Simperian stuff, you here it is. It says, after either choice is made, you find Lewis's old ship. Now this is Lewis right here, this Geraldo Rivera looking guy. I believe anyway. That's my guess, because he's the one that's touching her, and that's kind of the visual, you know, whatever. So Lewis's old ship, and you fly into space, and you just abandon your decision. You don't take responsibility. It's literally the meme of women don't take responsibility for their actions. It's, come on, guys, you got to think bigger than this. So she blows up one side or the other and then leaves. Like, you guys deal with it, not my problem. I defeated the big bad, and now I'm going to go be a space princess, I guess, in my space Porsche Winnebago. It really is mind-blowing that adults put this together, and this wasn't some fever dream somebody came up with after having their tonsils taken out. It's just, you have to ask yourself, what is the point? What is the point of creating all of this, just to tell such a shallow story, okay? It could have more depth. You could find out Eye Patch Lady was your mom or something like that, some Darth Vader scene, something like that. It's all just very surface area stuff, just like the song was talking about, is that there's no soul to it. There's no depth. It's empty frames. It doesn't mean anything because it's only meant to be comfortable to you. Of course, someone's going after their old friend. Now, if you switched out this female character for a character like Spike Spiegel, now he's going after one of his war buddies, right? He's going after somebody who used to be part of his gang. He's got old blood with them, you know, like he had with Vicious, that kind of thing. So it explains this vendetta to either save or defeat this person, right? It's one of those things where it's like, okay, we know where this came from. We get it. You copy and pasted most of it here. You copied. It's like that meme with the homework meme, right? Okay, you can copy my homework. Just don't make it look like you did it. And here we are, you know? So there you go. But one of the things that was important about this is that there's a user on X called LNL Sparks. That's LNL underscore SPARK, LNL Spark. They pointed out that Intergalactic was inspired by Akira. And again, you can feel some of that floating through here as well. There's a lot of effort to bring that aesthetic through. There's also a lot of effort to bring through the base aesthetic of a romanticized 1980s, okay? And what's important about that is that it's not bad to do that, okay? What the problem is that that has become the entirety of the market, okay? That's everybody everywhere doing that all the time now. Even your fantasy games are leaning into 1980s, early 1990s aesthetics of fantasy in order to shortcut trying to introduce you to their world. They want you emotionally connected to what they're presenting to you before they say a word to you. And this is a big problem, a very big problem. Not that you need to have huge blocks of text at the beginning, but it's exemplary of a problem we're facing much larger than video games, movies, comic book, manga, okay? This is an example of there not being enough children in the world, okay? Now, I know that sounds bizarre to you, right? It's like, well, what does this game have to do with kids? What does this have to do? The thing is that when there aren't enough kids, the future becomes nostalgic, all right? And this is just definitely nostalgic. She has a trackpad mouse, okay? She doesn't even have like an actual movie roundy mousey thingamahooza, not even a touchpad. She has a roll ball with two clicks, two bottom keys below it for clicker there thing when she talks to her eye patch lady. And so that's what you're dealing with. And so what happens is that when there are too many adults, and that's not to say we should go, you know, fixing that, right? We need to make sure that there's more kids, not that there's less adults, okay? Let me make that point clear before we move any further, all right? Please. So the situation that we face is that you're not necessarily dealing with a fact that people have a lack of vision for the future. It's that when there aren't children to see the future through, to create a future for, the nostalgia of having more control over the past becomes evident. So things like this that basically play up on every 1987 to 1997 sort of trope there is, you know, visual trope there is. It's even got some Toonami in here, mixed in here. It's really weird. So it's pulling from like the future is going to be more under my control, right? The future is going to look like, what I like, what I prefer, what I am familiar and comfortable with, but I will have more control over that nostalgia now, right? And so that's what you end up with when you don't have children to see the future through. Now, let me explain this. Now, you've got that Y2K situation coming through, and then you had the space age situation coming through. And these all corresponded with large birth rates. The millennials were kind of like at the 7, 8-year-old, 12-year-old mark during the turn of the millennium, 10 years old at the turn of the millennium. And so a lot of like forward thinking about what the future would look like for the children was happening. And so there was a lot of experimentation, like that blobular thing that Sony was up to with all their logos of just kind of nonsensical shapes. There's a lot of revitalist of the space age 70s kind of look with bell bottoms, but they were made out of vinyl. A lot of people were wearing see-through plastic kind of outfits and then tank tops underneath them to kind of look very futuristic. A lot of the bell bottoms and belly shirts sort of came back, but they were reinvented with this leather aesthetic and more see-through plastic, I guess. And the early Macintosh computers are probably a really good visual example for you. Not the Lisas, but like the early 2000s ones that had like the see-through plastic. You could see all the gizmos inside of the computer, and it was kind of that fogged plastic kind of look. That's what this kind of stuff is all about, is that when there's more children, people start thinking about the future more abstractly, more in fantastical, impossible realms, because children are allowed to live in that fantasy. Now, let me kind of explain what I mean there, is that children are allowed to live in the fantasy of teleporters, like Star Trek. Star Trek was not necessarily geared toward 20-somethings. It wasn't geared toward 5-year-olds either. But it definitely was geared toward the youth, because the youth could believe in the fantasy of a united world, a world that is post-racism, post-Cold War, Cold War, I'll spit it out eventually, and post-scarcity, right? So they could believe in the fantasy of a world, a utopia, if you will, where money didn't even exist, right? Even Abraham Lincoln, brought back from the dead, was astonished at the progress that humanity had made in the Star Trek universe, okay? And so that's what I'm talking about, is that children have the ability to believe in more abstract concepts of the future, whereas this steps in here and says the future is going to be the 1980s. The future is going to be the early 90s. The future is going to be that Pizza Hut that had all the neon lighting and all of the jukebox setup with the animated arm that came through and set the disc in place and spun it up, and you and your friends got the dance on the light-up disco floor doody-dad thing while you slipped around on pepperonis that got loose off the pizza. It's one of those things where when adults are in charge of the future and they're not working for children, right? They're not working to make a future for their children, not looking to the future through their children's eyes, okay? When they're looking through their own eyes, they want to have more control over things they're familiar with. And that's what happens. You can watch this in the cycle of our entertainment. This happens over and over and over again. It's about every 40 years that we run into this drought of kids or so. And unfortunately, it corresponds with a major conflict in humanity, usually is what happens. It's bad. It's not really a good reason why we end up having more kids, but it balances out, I guess. You get better games. That's a really dumb excuse. I'm sorry, but it's what happens. And so while we have less children, you're going to see more and more of these brands changing, more of these brands maturing, becoming less abstract and more instantly recognizable, because it's less about engaging the excitement you have about an idea, because that's very childish, right? And again, don't read me wrong. It's childish in the sense that children are allowed to be excited about an idea, not the plausibility of an idea. Okay, and that's where the adult comes in. Is the adult gets excited about the plausibility of an idea. You and I are excited about SpaceX because we see the possibility and the plausibility of space exploration, even in its most limited function, being at our doorstep, something we will witness with our own eyes in our lifetime, much like our parents and grandparents saw Neil Armstrong walk on the moon. So we have this plausible idea about space. Meanwhile, children are engaged with ideas like Gundam, where you have giant robot battles, and these sort of Pokemon ideas where you have Pokemon from space that can control different gravitational forces and things like that. Because again, it's engaging in the fantasy of the future, the fantasy of reality, where children are allowed to exist because we don't demand of them, we shouldn't, let's put it this way, we shouldn't demand of them to see reality in hard constructs, because that's how we stunt growth of our own species, very simply. That's how we stunt the advancement of our own understanding of ourselves, is when we tell children, this is the box, you must stay inside of it. And that's what this game does. That's what this game does, front to back, up and down and backwards, and it's, we can see right here, there's this effort to change the main character over. I still don't like her stupid expression, but I get what they're trying to do here. Kind of looks like that Star Wars character that got gutted. But this person asks, this is, why do game characters have to be attractive? And so you have like this litany of responses. And what you want to do is you want to really think about that, okay? Because the simple answer is, well, because we want to like look at pretty things, because we like pretty women, because it sells better, because sex sells, because appeal sells. Let me back that up a little easier, make the conversation a little bit more virtuous, okay? So we're not so much engaged with like, oh, wow, she's pretty to my definition. Let me just make this very simple. If you're playing a hero character in a game, and I'm not talking about Conker's Bad Fur Day where you're playing the villain. I'm talking about straight up hero, like you're talking about like Batman Arkham Knight, okay? Where you're very clearly the protagonist here, okay? In the Arkham series, all right? And so what you have to do is you have to apply an aspirational quality to that hero, okay? Why does Mega Man remain more popular today than any other attempt to clone that idea? Because Mega Man is an aspirational hero. This is why Superman, even all his dark iterations like Omni-Man and Homelander, why they probably won't outlive him. There'll be nice shadows in the background of Superman, but Superman will always reign supreme until another character who embodies better what his original purpose is, which is the aspirational man. And this is why this game fails. This is why this game misses even having a target audience to begin with, is that at the end of the day, the reality of what this game is that it appeals to people who are looking purely for an aesthetic. There's a bald space lady. She's a space bounty hunter. There's lots of 80s, 90s, early 90s tech that I am familiar with and I have a certain aesthetic attachment to. And I'd recognize the Pet Shop Boys, and I recognize the Akira light streaks, and I recognize that big giant laser swordy doodaddy thing, and I recognize these robot monsters that not necessarily look like Horizon Zero Dawn, but evoke a similar sort of soulless machine made this kind of attitude about them. So again, what you're dealing with is a collection of exploitive imagery, not necessarily a game or plot. And so finally, we have this right here. And so it explains very simply what's going on. And it says, over 250 developers have been working on this game for the last 4 years. After layoffs, Naughty Dog underwent a restructuring that Neil Druckmann ensured the company would operate as an IP powerhouse after that. I don't know, Intergalactic, the Heretic Profit doesn't really roll off the tongue, buddy. It's something you really got to concentrate to remember, right? It's why Overwatch was like, okay, I get it. They're over the world and they are watching it. Okay, I get it. It's very simple. Overwatch. Cool, I can remember that. Intergalactic, I want to call it Interstellar, but Intergalactic, the Heretic Prophet, you really got to be committed to explaining that game, that title. So it says, returns to Naughty Dog's roots. Ah, look at that. Another return to the roots. Oh, good. The story is set in an alternate universe where space travel is significantly advanced by 1986. So basically, 1986 was the end run, kind of like a Fallout setting of where the technology, the visuals of the aesthetic of the technology didn't advance beyond that, but the functionality and capability of it did. Because why not? Why not? You might as well just do that. You're going to play as Jordan Miyun, or it might be Munn, like Olivia Munn, I'm not sure. A dangerous bounty hunter who ends up stranded on Simperia, a distant planet whose communication with the outside universe went dark hundreds of years ago. That's what I said. These people have been forgotten about, and they were sort of abandoned, mutated, and then swore vengeance. It'll be an emotional, character-driven epic journey with the deepest gameplay in Naughty Dog's history, taking our learnings from our previous franchises and pushing them beyond anything we've ever done before. It takes inspiration from classic anime like the 1980 movie Akira and the 1990s series Cowboy Bebop. It's scored by Nine Inch Nails artist Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. So again, it's pulling from everything you can find for an intersection with that very niche tech and anime crossover sort of group from the late 80s, early 90s, millennial, Gen X, late Gen X kind of space, okay? And that's what you're looking at here. Is a complete cash grab for anybody that has a fondness for that visual. And as we explained with the story, it's a completely empty story. You end up just kind of having a really cheap Metal Gear Solid experience, I guess. So you'll have to let me know what you think down in the comments below, guys. And as always, good luck out there.